We are going to look at basic mechanics of functions. First, as usual in C or C++, and then we're going to learn how to basically write functions and call function in MIPS. So in C++, usually you have some type that your function going to return, and then you have the function name, and you have list of parameters. And this list of parameters also, they have the type specified with them. So for a function, usually you have a header file, and that just defines the function signature. Looking at that function signature, you can basically know how to call this function and what arguments you need to pass to that function. Also, you know that what this function is going to return to you. So for example, here, you see that this function pow is getting two integers and gonna return an integer to you. So you know that basically you can put it in this diagram that you are giving this arg0 and arg1 that are type integers, and this function going to do what it does. Maybe it's powering two numbers, and it's going to calculate the result, and it's going to return back that integer as a result. So here you can see that this is being used. For example, you have a series of numbers, and you have some variable for your results. And this is basically how you call it without actually looking at the implementation of this function. So the person who is writing a program to call a function actually doesn't need to know how that function is implemented. And the beauty of that is that these two pieces of code, the function itself and the caller, can be written independently without knowing basically any implementation details. So how they communicate together, that's kind of like an API that they communicate together. So there is series of argument that the function expect to receive for it to be able to calculate some return values. And basically, when you pass these arguments to a function, it's copied, and so it goes to a special place, and the function can consume that. And then after it's produced some result, it's gonna basically put this return value in some special place. And then in this way, they can actually communicate together. And that's kind of the standard that if you have multiple functions and they're all using the same mechanism, so they wouldn't break each other. So what we are using in MIPS, actually, we are using a few registers or few predefined registers in some specific way to achieve this. So as I said, these rules are defined and they are kind of set of a convention that you use, and you expect that other programmers are using that. So if you are basically taking some code from some, basically taking some function and bring it into your code, you should be able to call that without worrying about the implementation or how it's done, because you expect that the person who write that function also follow that convention. So what are those conventions? We have four arguments, four placeholder for arguments, and those are register 0, A0 to register A3. So A0, A1, A2, A3. So these four A registers, we are using it for argument. And again, by argument, I mean if you are passing something to your function. If you have some return value, we are using the register V0 and V1. So those are predefined for this function. These registers on their own, they are not really special, but this convention that we are using it in that specific way, make them special and kind of reserved for these functions. So the caller or main, or it could be another function, puts these values that you want to pass to that function into these registers. So if you have, for example, one argument, you just put it in A0. You don't have to like use all of them, of course. And you do that before you call your function. Then you call your function, and after you're returning back from the function, you expect that the return values gonna appear in V0 and V1. And usually you can put some comment on your code to specify which arguments this function is expecting and which return values is going to return. So something similar to C headers.